Hey guys, and welcome to now for something a little bit different, episode 37. This week, guys, we got another exciting episode. We're going to be doing something a little bit different. Once a month, I'm going to have my wonderful buddy Jose. Jose, welcome back.
Hi,
And
thanks for
I'm
having me
also
back.
going to, of course, and I'm also going to be having Justin, who's also here. Justin, welcome back, my friend. And
Hey, hello. Good to be back.
we're going to be doing the main thing, but it's going to be like a little thing I call spotlight, and the idea is to focus on a particular actor. The last time we all got together, we talked about the wonderful Cameraman. At least I think it's wonderful. I'm going to stick with that. um, and then, of course, a month or so prior, I was with Jose and my buddy Mike Wildebeest, and we talked about the Devils. So that all leads me to what we're going to be talking about today, which is Women in Love by uh, I can't think of his name. Anyway,
Ken Russell.
yes, Ken Russell. I had a brain fart, guys. We're going to be talking about another Ken Russell film, Women in Love, which came out in 1969. And hopefully next month we'll do another Oliver Reed film. And then after that, we're going to move on to a focus on Jeff Bridges, which is your choice, Jose, which I'm
All
very
right.
excited about.
Yes.
Jeff Bridges, wonderful actor. And then after that, we'll also focus on the career of Nicolas Cage, which
Hmm.
Justin picked. And you can never go wrong with some Nicolas Cage,
Yeah.
both wonderful actors. So really looking forward to talking about those guys as well. But again, that brings us back to today, which of course is Women in Love, which I'm super excited to talk about. I guess before I get into what we watched, I'll ask you, Jose. This was your pick. I want you guys each to pick something. What were your thoughts? I mean, as far as like when you were deciding which choice you wanted to pick for to talk about an Oliver Reed film, why did you go ahead and pick this one? I'm curious.
Well, I think uh well, first of all, I think it's one of Oliver Reed's best. And I know that with this particular film, I have seen it so many times, but I still don't know what it all means. And
That's why I picked this on.
I've actually avoided, believe it or not, listening to the commentaries, which would be
Uh,
so I think it would be
Ooh.
so easy. Um, and so, this is one of the films like Deliverance, John Borman's Deliverance, where I will probably watch it annually,
mm,
and see something different each time
mm,
that I've watched it, and I still have no idea what it what it all means. It would be nice if I actually read the novel it was based on. I think
mm,
I got about halfway through it and then I kind of stopped, but
yeah,
it's one of my favorites. And I mean, you can't beat this is the first time Ken Russell and Oliver Reed worked together. And then
yeah,
2 years later after this, they would produce The Devils, which was pretty crazy. So
Yeah,
yeah.
all
No,
I will
absolutely.
say before we get into it was there was a scene in this movie that I'm like, oh, so this is why Jose chose this movie. It's because it's Ken
the
Russell and
very
I
Oliver
wonder
Reed
what I
specifically,
wonder what it
but
could
they're
be. I have a sneaking suspicion.
Yes, it's the picnic scene. No. Uh, but yeah,
well, there
there
was
is
the
a
sausages
there is a
involved, but it wasn't the picnic scene.
there was definitely some meat going on there. But yeah, the very infamous scene, obviously. But I think um, obviously when it comes to full frontal nudity, I feel like when an actor does it, and especially if they do it in a way that reinforces the themes of the story, then
Yeah.
that's worth it, no matter how uncomfortable it makes some viewers. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I listen. And it's funny when you talked about you watched it countless times and you're still like grasping it. And I was kind of like, and I won't get too much of my thoughts, but that's why I watched it three times. I watched it two times without the commentary, and then the final time I watched it with the commentary by the writer.
Okay.
And I still have a decent grasp, but there are still things that I feel like you said, probably would be impacted more helpful by reading the novel. But I've also heard the novel is not an easy read. I hear it's a tough read to wrap your head around. I heard it's a good one, but I hear it's tough to get into.
Yeah, it's definitely very dense, very,
Yeah.
ye old English literature
Oh,
kind of thing. But it's yeah. Yeah, but you know, movies, if they're done well, can be like a good novel, and I think
Yeah.
visually, this film is almost like a good novel, and there's images and themes
Yeah,
and
oh, absolutely.
performances and dialogue that you can really wrap your head around. So that's why I
Oh
picked
no,
it.
definitely. No, absolutely. Well, I was glad you did because it gave me an excuse to get another Ken Russell film that I didn't have in the collection, and of course to add to the growing Oliver Reed collection.
Oh yeah.
So I'm super excited. So I guess since I'm already talking to you about why you picked it, I guess I'll move on to what have you watched recently? Have you caught anything good? Okay.
Justin, it's nice to be back on with Justin because we had co-hosted Watch Skip Plus together, created that little baby, that little digital baby. Um, but so recently we reviewed Maxine for the episode. That's coming
Oh,
out this week, later this week. So
no.
although we had not reviewed X on Watch Skip
Mm,
Plus, we did do Pearl, and then
okay.
Justin and I had actually seen X together when he was
Mm,
down with Randy and a bunch of people. So it was nice to come full circle and see Maxine and sort of finish the trilogy.
mm.
Um, I guess I will give you guys a bit of a spoiler free scoop on my
Oh,
thoughts on Maxine. Um, uh,
exclusive guys. You hear that?
yeah, this is going to be a big scoop. So Maxine was super disappointing for me. Um,
Dang.
I when I left the movie, my immediate phrase that I had said to Randy, who I'd seen this
Mm,
with, was that the film was too 80s for its own good. And
mm,
so if you guys think about 80s cinema and you think about
mm,
how a lot of it was just very, in your face, not a
mm,
lot of character stuff, and then a plot that kind of goes bonkers, especially when you think about thrillers like Brian De Palma thrillers, or even something like Vice Squad or Angel, which I would say
yeah.
that Maxine sort of like emulates that sort of like 80s sleazy vibe.
Mm,
Um, and while it's very, very good looking and definitely has homages to Giallo and a gloved killer, that kind of thing,
yeah.
it was unfortunately supremely disappointing. And
Yeah.
it's funny that I had read some interviews with Ty West, and he
Mm,
said that after doing X and Pearl back to back, there was a lot of pressure for him to stick the landing with Maxine.
mm,
And very sadly, in my opinion, he does not stick the landing with this.
yeah.
Um, the film, for a good while, is really, really, really good, and then it just kind of like poops the bed a little bit. And sadly, um, it made me appreciate Pearl more, which I
Yeah.
was, that was not Pearl was not my thing, although there were
Mm,
some parts of it that were really, really strong.
mm,
But stacked up next to X, it was quite disappointing. Any of you
yeah.
catch that yet?
So I did, and I do regret because I was thinking because I caught it on Wednesday night because they were doing like an early screening. I was like, I can sneak out and see it at 7. And I should have said something to you. I was like, I figure you guys are doing it, but I just lost track of time. And so if I was going off the Watch Skip Plus, I would still give this a watch, and I did enjoy it, but I wouldn't say supremely, but there was an element of being disappointing. And I think once I listened to the episode, I think you and I are going to vibe very similarly, where I think the build for it, for the most part, was pretty solid. And there's some really like gruesome stuff in there and very dark humor and very funny stuff. But I feel like the whodunit angle, and maybe it was meant to be intentional, but I feel like it was way too obvious. And I thought that hurt. And I did just kind of feel like the ending almost felt rushed in a weird way. And
Yeah,
I feel like it's like you said, it's definitely very heavy-handed with its 80s-ness. And I think that's the point. It's supposed to be talking like, oh, by the time it was 80s, there's an excess in that. But I don't know, there's a way to do it without it just kind of feeling pat. And I think that was the problem. It just very much
Mm,
felt like, yeah, you're not really going that deep with this. And it's funny because X is very, in a sense, on the nose with having that 70s vibe, but it still had its own feel to it. And
mm,
I know it was because I saw it with you and Randy and, Scooter, but I really loved X. And I quite enjoyed Pearl. I was the one that was championing him for it. And I think as time has gone on and definitely coming out of Maxine, I'm like, I still prefer X over all of them, but I do think Pearl's kind of rising up. I think Pearl does a really good
yeah.
job. I think being more
mm,
character based. I think that's the issue here is there's not much character going on. And again, maybe that's the point. But I still had fun with it. It was a good time, but it did just kind of feel like it never quite got out of second gear. And once it did, it really just rushed to the finish line. And as much as I had fun watching Bobby Cannavale in this, he and Michelle Monaghan felt like they were in a completely different movie. Like that
Oh,
just
completely.
they felt so forced into this. I maybe that was the point because you also have those two and Kevin Bacon because now you have all these really bigger star names. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
X you had Jenna Ortega who was on the rise, Mia Goth who was popular within this community, and even Brittany Snow who I know never maybe quite took off after like the mid to late 2000s, but I think she's carved a nice career for herself. So she's
Yeah.
at least recognizable. But this, I get it's the point, and I did enjoy it, but it did feel more hollow than the other two films, in my opinion. An enjoyable one that I would say is worth watching, but it would have honestly would have been better served if it wasn't connected to X and Pearl, or specifically X, because then I would have been like, yeah, maybe I would have still been feeling the same way. But I'm like, hey, it's a fun throwback. But coming off of X and Pearl, it is a little bit too on the nose and kind of loses the plot after a while, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
I did not like where they basically took the Maxine character, right? Like don't give us like a really strong woman who, is just going to do whatever it takes and then make her a shrinking violet final girl. Also,
and or kind
there
of
is a
letting
non
I was going to say, and also I forgot to mention Giancarlo Esposito's in this too, and he kind of just overtakes her in a sense
Oh
once you
yeah.
see where that goes. And I think that's where you were hinting at.
And speaking of a completely different movie, that whole there is a turn with Esposito's character that I was just like, why is this in here? And then two, it feels like it's completely out of norm. I don't know. It was very strange. It was almost like they were trying to say Ty West was trying to say the 80s was questionable morality or whatever, because where Esposito's character goes, it's kind of like, I don't know, would we have done that? Or maybe that's not the whole point, right?
And even if we would have, that's so obvious. Like, you're the first person to come up with the 80s being a questionable morality. Like, this has been done to death, dude.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a nod to a classic thriller. That's my favorite movie of all time. And I thought that was way on the nose, and then they didn't do anything with it, which was even more sour to me.
Yeah.
Felt even more sour to me. So yeah. And then I checked out the A Family Affair. This is directed by one of my favorite directors, Richard LaGravenese. If you haven't seen a film called Living Out Loud, LaGravenese directed and wrote that. It has Holly Hunter, Danny DeVito, and Queen Latifah in it. So good. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. But the film is called The Family Affair. It's on Netflix. It stars Nicole Kidman, Zac Efron, Joey King.
Oh, okay. I heard of that one. Yeah.
Okay, yes. I've seen ads for this one and posters.
I definitely enjoyed the film, but it takes a while to warm up. In fact, the first, I think 35 minutes of it or so, I turned to Scooter and I was kind of like, this is actually really bad. But I ended up enjoying it and surprisingly enjoying it as it went along. It is not the first film recently that talks about like an older woman with a younger man. I think that film on Prime, Anyone, I know it's not Anyone But You.
Idea of You? Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. An Idea of You, where Anne Hathaway is, she's dating this pop star, and then she sees on the internet she's being called a cougar. So this is definitely not the first film to have a romance with an older woman and a younger guy. But again, it ended up being a little bit more entertaining, but you're just going to have to slog through the setup, and then it's actually quite good, if not completely predictable.
Well, the playoffs there, that's all. At the end of the day, you don't mind slogging through a little bit of that. That other one, what's that other one that they did on Not a Bomb a couple months ago? Not quite the age difference, but it was Jennifer Lawrence and that young guy.
Oh yeah, No Hard Feelings.
That was, obviously she was only in her 30s, like probably mid 30s, and he was in like 17, 18-year-old, but also the cougar, that was
the cougar angle.
Yeah, the cougar.
But that one, No Hard Feelings in a way reminded me of Can't Buy Me Love, where like the nerdy guy was like, "Hey, I want to rent you so I can be popular," and No Hard
Yeah,
Feelings was sort of like the parents were like, "We'd like to hire you to deflower our kid and make him popular or whatever." And that movie was I was expecting, it was weird that No Hard Feelings was like the first progressive sex comedy. Like I was expecting something like Porky's. But
yeah,
when I say it was progressive, Where It Goes was not what I thought, and it was actually rather surprisingly refreshing.
yeah.
Um,
No,
yeah, so A Family Affair. Kathy Bates is in this as well. She's actually pretty good. Joey King, I don't know. I like her. I think she's adorable.
mm,
Her character is a little grating in this.
mm,
Um, but while I was watching this, I kept thinking to myself, I kept thinking about Justin and I reviewing Bullet Train and how I was kind of like, why is she in this? She's terrible in Bullet Train or whatever.
mm,
And I was just thinking like, yeah, I still don't think she's right for Bullet Train, but she's obviously perfect for this, even though she's a little annoying.
yeah.
Anybody check this out?
I
I
have
have
not
not,
yet.
but I've been kind of curious. It's on
Yeah,
Prime, right? Am I correct? Is it
Netflix.
Prime or Netflix? Okay. Well, well, maybe I'll eventually. I'm on that. Pretty much Prime is the only one I'm still subscribed to be honest with you, because I've been going through my personal collection, but I found that Prime, and especially using Shutter through Prime, is like the only ones that I typically tend to use quite a bit. So
yeah. Nice.
I was gonna say, Zac Efron is in it, and he still has that weird, like I don't know if it's the fillers or something. His jawline is just super chiseled, and it looks really odd.
well, I
Um,
wondered, did he do it? Because I feel like that Ricky Stenicki movie, which I did watch and thought it was all right,
Yeah.
but I think he said he went to do that right off of the Iron Claw, which is why he still had that. So I don't know if maybe
Maybe
he
this
was
was
still
soon after that. Yeah,
still soon after, because I feel like that's where that was made. Why he got those was for that, and like I feel like we're not going to lose those for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, when you
I,
think back when I first saw him, went from being that kid from that musical high school thing to all
yeah,
this stuff Baywatch, and I was like, hold on a second, this kid was like a high school, skinny kid. Now he looks like he's fucking all roided up. You know what I mean? But
I know.
but he's been given some decent performances. Like the Iron Claw movie, I wasn't 100% in love with that movie, but I will say the acting throughout was pretty solid. And there's been some other stuff that he's done that where he's putting some really good performances. So I have to give him credit because I never thought that he would grow as far as his range goes. I thought he would be constantly doing the same type of movies over and over again because I just didn't see the potential that he might have had to do something bigger. And he's actually shown some range, so I give the guy credit. And he
Yeah,
seems to go back and forth between the stupid like Ricky Stenicki movies to something like Iron Claw to something like this. He can bounce back and forth, which is something I like to see when I'm watching an actor. I hate to see someone
Definitely.
get pigeonholed in like a one type of role, and that's all we see them in. I mean, I know of your hatred for Ryan Reynolds, Jose, but
yeah,
I honestly, I think it's a shame. He's been doing Deadpool since fucking since Waiting or what was that movie where he played the college guy or he's the big man on
Van
Oh,
the
Van
block.
Wilder.
Wilder. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
he's basically that's an early version of Deadpool. But then you look at a role like Buried. I don't know if you ever saw Buried, the
Oh
independent
yeah,
Buried.
movie.
Yep.
he's excellent,
He
Barry.
showed he
Or what
shows
was
that
it?
dramatic range.
What was the film?
You
The
know?
Voices or something like that.
The Voices
Really
Yeah,
was
good.
really
yeah.
good. I
So
actually
like
kind of feel like he's gone back and forth. It's just a lot of
yeah,
his more dramatic stuff just seems to kind of get like just dumped on like streaming or like very limited
yeah,
release. Because even
yeah,
though I haven't seen it, I don't know if it's good. I know he did a movie with the I think it was The Woman in Gold or something with Helen Mirren. And I feel like he's
yeah.
always doing, because I quite like Ryan Reynolds, but I just feel like he is somebody that most people just want that comedy out of him. And
They want that
I
snarky,
enjoy his,
harsh ranking.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
enjoy his comedy. And even with the Deadpool movies, I think he at least tries to throw in, it might not be that deep, but like, the bit where the love angle and all that to kind of make it where
yeah,
it's like, I'm not just doing the snarkiness the whole time. I'll
yeah,
throw in a little bit of my dramatics as much as they're going to let me do it.
yeah,
But
yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah. No, no, go ahead.
S- Oh, I was just gonna say, one last thing. This is really sort of snarky, but like obviously it's it's a romance between him and Nicole Kidman, and I was like, well, if you take out all the rumored fillers and Botox out of both of their faces, you can make a third face at this point, and it could be a three-way. But anyway, that's probably a
Oh.
terrible joke. But-
Wow.
The same part is-
That's a good movie idea though. Let's be honest here. That should have been Maxine. That's the Ty
Face
West.
Off
Make that
2.
your next movie where you do or Face Off 2, where we do that, but we make it like body horror, like a Brian Yuzna film.
Yes, exactly. That's a good idea. I might have to prime that. And then the speaking of prime, so this is the last thing I'll talk about.
Yeah,
I
of course.
gave a shot to a film called Dark Harvest. Actually, it's from a novel by a gentleman named Norman Partridge, and if I'm
Okay.
reading the front of the book correctly, I think it won a Bram Stoker award.
Very nice.
And so I don't want to give too much away about it. I think it's best to go into this film, Dark Harvest, not really knowing,
Mhm.
because it's a very, very odd concept. I will sort of maybe posit it as kind of like Jeepers Creepers meets The Hunger Games meets Children of the Corn. And so hopefully that whets your interest. But what should whet your interest a little bit more is it's directed by one David Slade, who I am a huge fan of, the horror film 30 Days of Night. He also
Oh, okay.
directed the pilot for Hannibal, as well as a bunch of different episodes of that. I really love David Slade. I think he's a great director. Don't hold the fact that he did a Twilight film against him, but his debut movie was Hard Candy with Patrick Wilson, and
Ooh, that's a rough movie, man.
yeah,
Very good.
it's a great movie. And I want to say Elliot Page.
Yes.
Yeah, Elliot Page was in that as well. So, but this one it's actually really really good. It is a period horror film, but for its concept, and the novel itself is a very, very quick read. I think it's only like 205 pages or something like that. But I read the novel and then I checked out the movie, and the movie, I think, improves upon the book and actually adds more dimension to the book. And it's actually rather gruesome and gorier than I actually thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised people haven't talked about it more. It's actually kind of a fun horror film.
Is
So
it like
I-
streaming on Prime or Netflix or?
it's streaming on Prime.
Okay. I'll have to look
Yeah,
for it.
and apparently the film, David Slade, I think, had some issues with what the studio wanted and some changes from the book. And so I think it was supposed to have been released early 2023.
Oh, okay.
And here we are almost a year later and it's finally out, but it's really good.
So it did come out last October because I rented it on
Oh.
Amazon Prime. And it had a little bit of a buzz coming out that time because it does have a bit of a Halloween feel to it, like small town Halloween feel. And I quite liked it. I haven't read the novel yet, but I did notice they've been promoting it pretty heavily on Prime. So I could see it come this Halloween season, or pretty much now. But I think especially once we get closer, September, October, where people will start championing movies that are set around Halloween or have that fall feel to it, because we watch horror movies year round, so that's kind of one of the specialties of Halloween. Put your movie around that time. I could see it kind of picking up because there was a little bit of buzz, but I think the fact that I might have spent which not a lot, but I think $8 to rent it last October, whereas opposed to it just, I think if it would have went straight to streaming instead of making people rent it right away, or had maybe even a small little theatrical might have helped. But I could see it. I mean, Amazon's been promoting it like crazy as like, oh, you should watch this because it's on streaming now. So I'm hoping that'll kind of rev up. And that reminds me, I want to check out the novel because yeah, I quite enjoy it. It's a little rough around the edges, but I think that works in its favor with the plot going. And I really like the atmosphere of the movie. I'm a big sucker. It's kind of almost like I'm not the biggest. And it doesn't hold up as well, but one of the things I did like about the original Children of the Corn movie was I liked that small farmland atmosphere, and I feel like this kind of captures that as well. So
Definitely. And a little Pumpkinhead as well.
yes,
Oh, no.
definitely.
Yeah. I think
Awesome.
the biggest, I think, stars in this are Jeremy Davis. He has a supporting role. Luke Kirby. I don't know if any of you know that actor. I love that actor. But the lead, his name is Casey Likes, I think. But he has had an interesting career on Broadway. His Broadway debut was in the Almost Famous musical.
Oh,
and
nice.
then right from there, he landed the gig on Back to the Future on Broadway. So So he has basically, you know, been in movies that were turned into musicals, but like
Mhm.
significant movies that were turned into musicals. So interesting career for him on Broadway, but he's actually pretty good in the lead role, as is the lead female as well. So it's good.
That's awesome. I have to actually, those are two musicals that I actually would spend the money to go see, because who doesn't love Back to the Future? And to see them turn it into a musical, and Almost Famous is just such a, in my opinion, such a perfect film as a movie, and it's so musical as it is. I'd love to see that,
Yeah,
the Broadway
that's good.
adaptation of it. That's awesome. Very cool. So I guess that'll bring me over to you, Justin. What have you got the chance to watch lately?
All right, so I already talked about Maxine, so I'll also talk about a double
Yeah.
feature I did recently, and it's two movies. It will surprise a lot of people that I have not seen yet or hadn't seen yet up until then, and they are two cross-dressing classics from the '90s. That being The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. And this was
Yeah.
actually a really interesting double feature to do because on paper they sound like they're the same movie. Priscilla came out in '94, To Wong Foo was '95. You had three drag queens basically going on a road trip, but
Mm,
they take differing turns. So Adventures of Priscilla, it more or less focuses, yeah, there's some like where they hit stops here along the way, but it's less about the narrative and more really just about seeing Terrence Stamp, Hugo Weaving, and Guy Pearce, three differing personalities, but sharing the same, almost you could say, love and passion for being, different and cross-dressing,
mm,
and being different ages, but where they all come together. I will say some of the narrative beats in the back end with them getting to the, Hugo's wife. Well, I guess it's kind of a spoiler, but Hugo's wife, she's the one that's basically hired him to do the show, and then where they kind of encounter stuff in a small town sometimes doesn't feel quite as realistic as I think they wanted it to be
mm.
because it kind of felt forced in, but it still hit. But the three leads are so wonderful together, and just especially Stamp. I mean, I think by now he's kind of made a career playing characters like this, but that was very, I wouldn't say controversial, but was very unique because he was still known at that point for playing macho roles, and that was kind of
Yeah.
a turning point for him to play this type of character. And I really enjoyed that. And then Tu Wong Fu tricks
Yeah.
you into thinking it's going to be a road movie, but then it ends up just being a fish out of water because they get stuck in a small town. And while the narrative is tighter, there's a part of me that was almost like, I don't know. Sometimes the fish out of water stuff doesn't always work for me, and some of the small town begins to accept these cross dressers did feel a little bit forced, but it worked for me. One, because the three leads are fantastic together, and they play around a little bit with, yes, some of the beats, especially with, I think it was Jason London, I think there. It's sweet enough, even if it's a little bit obvious, but there's always things when you see these types of, and this one isn't like a type of comedy like a Joanna Man or anything. It's better than that. But where you have these where it's like, how does nobody notice? And they play with that. Like I won't spoil it, but there was a thing where I'm like, how is nobody noticing this one thing? And then the character flat out states, yeah, I noticed that like from the beginning, but I just accepted you for who you were. And I'm like, all right, you kind of won me for that. But yeah, it's just both are very delightful in their own ways. I would say Priscilla is a bit more of a character study, but where I think To Wong Fu, while it might be a little bit more, I wouldn't say mainstream, but it is more focused on a love letter to old Hollywood, obviously. What
Mm,
surprised me was like the fact that outside of seeing Patrick Swayze in the opening putting on the makeup, you never actually see any of the drag queens as, that's who they are. And I kind
yeah.
of like that approach a little bit more because Priscilla, it is about like the conflict between your born identity and the one you choose. Whereas with Tu
Mm,
Wong Fu, it's just who I chose to be is who I am. And I love the fact that you had these two movies on the surface seem very similar, but are differing in approach and make for a really good double feature and are very
yeah.
entertaining in their own right. So I ended up quite enjoying both. I mean, if I had to choose, maybe I think Priscilla kind of resonated first, but I mean, I I think I've been thinking about Tu Wong Fu a little bit more, and the only
Mm,
thing I kind of wish is as great as they were, I almost wish Wesley Snipes kind of got a little bit more to do because as good as he is, I kind of feel like he gets kind of sidetracked with the old Hollywood stuff, like because he
yeah.
finds the woman who has all the old Hollywood memorabilia and used to work with that, and I kind of feel like he got lost along the way. But I don't know, both are very delightful. I'm kind of kicking myself taking so long to get to both of them. It's not like I haven't had access to them, but I had time to do a double, and I was just like, it was Pride Month, and I'm like, I should finally knock these two off. And I believe they are both streaming on Prime as well. If anybody hasn't seen them yet and wants to get to them,
Oh, that's awesome.
but
I have to see Priscilla. I've seen Tu Wong Fu like years ago, and you couldn't go wrong with those three. You know, in those roles, they were fantastic. But I still haven't seen Priscilla, so I'm gonna have to check that out for sure.
yeah, yeah, Priscilla's very good. I mean, just Guy Pearce really chewing the scenery and coming into his own in that movie is kind of like there's still a lot of like comedy in that movie as well. But yeah, both are very, very good, and I recommend both. And there's a nice cameo in Tu Wong Fu that once it happens, I'm like, of course he's in this. But I was like, man, that had to been a big deal to get him here because another movie of his hadn't released just yet that would make more sense as to why he cameoed in this. That I thought was
Mhm.
very nice.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah, Leguizamo is fantastic in
Yeah.
Tu Wong Fu. He's
Yes.
so good.
All right. I guess I'll get into what I watched. I didn't watch a ton of. Well, okay, I watched a bunch of stuff, but the reality is I didn't get a chance to really wrap my head and write about everything, summarize everything. So, I recently watched Thelma in the movie theaters, and I was surprised. Number one, I was surprised because we don't have any indie theaters by where I live. It's just the multiplexes, and they very rarely get something unless it's nominated for an Academy or a Golden Globe. And you have this actress, June Squibb, who's playing a grandmother. She's 93 years old, and she gets scammed by a con artist, claiming to be a lawyer, saying her grandson has been arrested and he ran somebody over, and they need to send this lawyer money right away, otherwise, he's never going to get out of this. And she's 93 years old. She's not thinking. She's panics. So of course she makes her way to the post office, and she mails the money. And then of course, lo and behold, she finds out it's a scam. So basically, the movie is a comedy, but it's about her trying to get her money back. It's like $10,000, and it revolves around her trying to figure that out. It's written and directed by a guy named Josh Margolin. He had only done one other short film, something called The Dentist. He does a really impressive job. He also handles writing the script, and she's joined by people like Richard Roundtree, which I didn't expect to see. I mean, everyone knows Richard Roundtree, of course, from Shaft. That's probably, I think, the big stuff that he's known for. He's done a ton of television and, some other film roles here and there. You have Parker Posey in there in a role. She's playing the mother. You have Clark Gregg. He's playing the father. And then you have the grandson, who's a gentleman named Fred Heschlinger. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong. Daniel. He's been in stuff like, if you guys seen the Fear Street films on Netflix, he was on those.
Yeah. Wait, Fred Heckinger?
Yeah, I think that's if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Oh, I love that guy. He's good.
Yeah. He was in the 8th Grade, and then News of the World with Tom Hanks, which I still haven't seen yet. But
yeah,
he plays the grandson. And then Malcolm McDowell has a small role. It's pivotal. He plays the big con artist. And yeah, the film's essentially, it's a really well done comedy, and it's basically about her trying to teaming up with Richard Roundtree. They're on like this electric scooter, and they're trying to find out the place where this package went to, and just basically trying to get her money back. And it was a really sweet film, really funny. And June Squibb, also the lead actress, she's been in a ton of stuff. She's been in Scent of a Woman, Meet Joe Black. She played in About Schmidt. She played the wife of Jack Nicholson, who passed away.
Oh yeah.
And she actually, I didn't know this, she was in Nebraska, and she was nominated for an Academy Award. So she does a really good job. I didn't remember her from any of those other movies, so it shows you how bad my memory is. But it was a really good movie. It was in and out of the theaters in about a week, and it was definitely well worth watching. So I'm glad I got a chance to see that.
Yeah. I'm actually happy to say that I was able to sneak in a viewing of that a few weeks ago, and it's still it's only one showing a day, but they're still showing it in my Regal, so I think it's been doing decently in my area. Yeah, it's a cute little film. I think sometimes it's you could tell it's a newer director because having to go between Thelma and then the grandson and his parents stuff, that drama doesn't always quite work together until the end. But I think everything I had only seen him in 8th grade, but I thought he was really cute in this movie. I actually ended up developing a crush on him. But yeah, it's a really cute, sweet movie. I loved seeing Squid and Roundtree together. Roundtree, you know, a much softer performance for him. I just liked him wanting to play Daddy Warbucks and Annie and like get the little bits.
I gotta be home by 8 o'clock. I got, he's in this old folks home, and he's like, I
Yeah.
gotta be home by 8 o'clock. They're waiting on me. I'm the star of the show. Yeah, no, yeah, it was definitely a cute movie. So, I saw that. Then I did a rewatch on a film that I hadn't seen in years, Mumford. This is directed by Lawrence Kasdan of all people, and he
Yeah.
did. Obviously, most people know him from Body Heat, Big Chill, Wyatt Earp, Dreamcatcher, or Darling.
Silverado.
Yeah, Silverado.
Did he
And then
write Star
obviously,
Wars? Did he
yeah,
help write
his
Star
writing
Wars?
career. I was going to say the next thing, his writing career, of course. The guy wrote everything.
Okay.
He wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. He wrote the screenplay for the Solo movie that came out a few years back. And this was another like really kind of cute, low key comedy, but it had a little more going to it. Basically, the premise is you have Lauren Dean, who plays the lead role of Mumford, and he's this guy that moves to this small town, which is also called Mumford, and he becomes the psychologist, and he's very slowly gains the trust of the townspeople. They all really seek out his advice and his wisdom, and he becomes very popular very quick in a very short amount of time, and all to the chagrin of the other two therapists in town who can't stand it because he's taking all their patients. um, and also a narcissistic lawyer played by Martin Short, who he refuses to give treatment to because he's a narcissist. So he refuses to treat Martin Short. I should also mention you also have another really great cast with this. You have Hope Davis, you have Jason Lee, you have Pruitt Taylor Vince, excuse me, who I love.
Love him. Yeah.
You have Arth Woodard. I'm getting that name wrong here. Ted Danson, and I didn't even realize this. You have Elizabeth Moss in a very early role.
Interesting.
From The Handmaiden stuff. You have David Paymar, Jane Addams. Oh, and Zoe Deschanel. It's her first role that she ever did. So yeah, you got a nice little cast. So basically, he's becoming popular in this town very quickly. Everybody loves him except for these three people that are out to get him, and they uncover, excuse me, a big secret, which I won't give away. And that kind of spirals, and everybody kind of realizes the truth about him. And it's not like this major, like, oh my God, he's a serial killer kind of thing, but they uncovered this big secret about him, and it still wraps up really nicely. People forgive him of this secret, and it's just a really cute movie. I definitely worth say check it out. I don't know if it's available on streaming stuff. I picked it up for like $1, like used, and just had a really good time with it. So yeah, I mean, pretty much, I didn't see it I didn't get a chance to write up a lot of stuff. But those two are definitely worth checking out. Like yourself, I also saw Maxine. And for the most part, I enjoyed it. I'm like you guys. I'm not going to go too much into details. The things I did not like about that were the fact that it was very predictable. It was very predictable, and you're right. It was a little bit too 80s for its good for itself. Like it shouldn't have been to that degree. But yeah, those are the main things. So yeah, that kind of wraps up what I've been watching. So I guess from there we can pivot into the crew. I'll hand that over to you, Jose, if you want to touch base on that for us.
Sure. So this movie is directed by Ken Russell. We actually, if you want a lot more detail, I guess you can check out our Your Devils episode where we did talk about him. But just really briefly, I mean, Ken Russell is the director of films like, well, actually, he's probably most famous for this film as well as Tommy with Roger Daltrey of The Who, but also his only studio film, Altered States, with William Hurt. But I think where most of us are going to know him is from the pictures he did with Vestron Video or Vestron Pictures, and those were 1986's Gothic, as well as a segment he did for the film Aria, The Lair of the White Worm, and then Salome's Last Dance. So I think those are the ones that probably most people would know. And then he also had a sort of a flash later in his career with Crimes of Passion, and then the film Whore in 1991, which was an NC-17 film. He is known for his sort of like excessive and flamboyant imagery and scripting. He loves it when actors sort of let it all go and they're sort of hysterical. That seems to be a motif for a lot of his films. Curiously enough, he wanted to be a ballet dancer. I don't know if many people know that. He ended up then getting into the military, and then because he spent a lot of time with his mother, who unfortunately had mental illness, they loved to watch movies together. And so he ended up doing a lot of films and documentaries, and then he started doing biopics of these composers. And then he ended up, directing films like Women in Love, and then just going from there. I think they've often described him as an iconoclast, and I think every time they thought that he was going to make a film where he would maybe go left, he went right. And I think that's probably why he's one of the most enduring and curious directors in terms of his resume and the films that he put together. Justin, you're smiling. What do you think about Ken Russell?
No, I'm smiling because I'm happy to see you doing that, but two, I love Ken Russell. I'm also smiling because the one that I think most people know him for is Lair of the White Worm, and that's one I still haven't gotten to actually. I've more into the Devils and Tommy, and then this was the first time watch for me. But just listening to you talking
Yeah, I
about
mean,
Ken Russell.
the Devils would be by far, if they would just give that fucking film, like we talked about it when we did the Devils, if they would just give that film a popular role, like just get through all the headache and all the paperwork and just figure it out and just release that damn thing, that thing would be huge. Like we talked about it. It's so ridiculous that you have to go through so much effort to try to find a copy of that film that's close to what it's supposed to, like his vision of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's one of those ones. It should be like on the level of Clockwork Orange or films of that nature. You know?
Yeah.
But
I mean, I just think, we talked about this on the episode when that movie was released. Like the Catholic Church was like, this is heresy.
Exactly.
And so it's never gotten like an official release, but and the script is written by and produced by one Larry Kramer. Larry Kramer is both a writer and a playwright, and initially he started in Columbia Pictures, where he was sort of like rewriting scripts. And in 1978, he sort of wrote a novel called Faggots. It's the official title. But this one was basically about, the gay community, and what he it examined what he characterized as sort of like shallow, promiscuous gay relationships in the 70s. And Kramer was also instrumental in founding ACT UP, which was it stood for AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. But obviously after, the HIV crisis, and then how it was characterized as like the gay cancer and only gays could get it, he sort of started that group to rail against what he saw were basically just the government not really caring about gay men and women dying. He also was a co-founder of Gay Men's Health Crisis, which is the world's largest private organization assisting people living with HIV and AIDS. And then from all of that, he actually wrote a play called The Normal Heart that has since been turned into an HBO film. But this was one of his first screenplays. The first time I saw this, I was actually like, wait a minute, that Larry Kramer? But yes, in fact, that Larry Kramer. So he wrote this, and then our DP is a gentleman named Billy Williams. So what's curious about Billy Williams is that he is one of the cinematographers for The Exorcist. And you may say, wait a minute, Jose, hold on. Owen Roizman shot The Exorcist, but Billy Williams, in fact, shot the beginning portion of The Exorcist, which was set in Iraq. And so all of that photography was basically done by Williams.
Uh-huh.
He actually was, I believe that he was there filming for like a petroleum company, and he actually had
Mm.
owned his own Arriflex camera. And so I guess Friedman called him up and was like, "Hey, you're there and you got the camera, let's do it." So he shot those opening shots. But he is also the cinematographer for On Golden Pond and Gandhi. He won an Academy Award for Gandhi, actually. He's also done his share of acting as well. Other films that he shot: Sunday Bloody Sunday, which was by John Schlesinger.
Mm.
That has a weird tie to this because Alan Bates had actually been approached by John Schlesinger to play the lead in that. And
Oh, okay.
strangely, get this, Bates, who I believe at the time maybe he had gotten married and he was sort of like shifting the tone of his career, he was sort of like, "Yeah, I'm not going to do that because of the simulated man-on-man love."
Mm.
Okay. All right there. He's also shot the films The Wind and the Lion, Voyage of the Damned, and then 1987 Suspect with Cher, which I've always loved because it's a legal thriller. And I don't know if you guys remember the twist in that, but I was sort of like, yeah, I can see that of who the actual killer was. And then the Donald Sutherland movie in '84, Ordeal by Innocence, if you've ever seen that. And then he and Russell reunited and shot 1989's The Rainbow, which is actually the first novel by D.H. Lawrence. And then Lawrence would write Women in Love after that.
Oh, okay.
Curiously enough, just to piggyback on the original source material, D.H. Lawrence, he wrote this, obviously challenging a lot of notions about sexuality and then gender politics and assigned roles of what men and women are supposed to do, how men and
Mm.
women are supposed to be perceived, how men interact with each other. Um, Curiously enough, if you dive into D.H. Lawrence's history, it is
Mm.
rumored that around the time that he was writing Women in Love, that he may or may not have fallen in love with a male farmer that he had met during his like sort of travels.
Mm.
And it is also rumored that his wife was aware of this, and then that it might have been one of the factors that eventually led to D.H. Lawrence and her being divorced. But if you are at all curious about where some of the sort of issues or character motivations come from for this movie, you should not be surprised to know that Lawrence might have had a homosexual relationship. And strangely, Bates also
Mm.
had homosexual relationships, although he was married, I think, several times to women.
Mm.
But that was sort of like an open secret in Hollywood and in
Yeah.
the UK, that Bates just sort of had dalliances with men while he was married. So, yep. And that's our below the line. I don't know. Did you want to go into the cast or somebody else doing the cast?
Yeah, I can do the cast. That's not a problem.
Okay.
So in our, I mean, there's a couple, I guess, co-leads, if you will. We have Alan Bates, playing Rupert Beckins. Um, he was first, one of his first big roles, right before this in '68. He was nominated for an Oscar, for The Fixer. And that's part of what led to the casting in this, because they were able to attach a guy that had just gotten an Academy Oscar nom, and it made the producing end of things easier because they were able to attach, because everybody else at that point, they were known, but they weren't like huge names. Even Reed wasn't like a name at that point, really, like a big name. Um, he had done stuff like in 1960, The Entertainer, Whistle Down the Wind in '61, The Running Man in '63.
Not that
Zorba.
Running Man.
Yeah, I know, right?
A noir thriller.
I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking, hold on, did Stephen King? Hold on, Stephen King wrote the Running. It threw me for a second.
Yes.
We didn't
Uh,
know, but Stephen King is actually a time traveler.
Yeah,
exactly. Or maybe he lifted it from this guy. I don't know.
maybe.
He did uh, Georgia Girl in '66, Far from the Madding Crowd in '67, Hamlet in 1990. Later on in the career, he did stuff like Gosford Park in 2001 and The
Yep.
Sum of All Fears in 2002. And believe it or not, he did a movie as late as 2020. He did a movie called Shuttlecock, which I have no idea anything
Hmm.
about. But he must be still around kicking, making movies, which is great. Of course.
Maybe that's a
Oh,
different Alan Bates, because I feel like he
oh,
passed away in,
that's weird.
I want to say
Or
like
It might have been a mistake. It
2003.
might have been a mistake. I don't know why that
or
showed up.
Shuttlecock was in production for a while and just sat on the
Yeah,
shelf
maybe.
until
Yeah,
2020.
That's
I'm using IMDb as my cheat sheet, but I might have accidentally wrote something down by accident. So
okay.
um,
Yeah,
it's very well
yeah.
possible. So then I guess our next co-lead, male lead, is of course, good old Oliver Reed, who's playing Gerald Critch, and Gerald has, excuse me, Oliver, as we talked in The Devils and in Condor Man, I went over his resume a lot. So, he did stuff like the Sword of Sherwood Forest in 1960, The Pirates of Blood River in 62, Night Creatures in 62. He did a lot of stuff with Hammer Films. He did The System, or otherwise known as The Girl Getters, in 64. Of course, the big film I think that a lot of people also, besides this one and The Devils, is Oliver in 68, which was directed by his uncle, Carol Reed. I'll never forget What's His Name, he did in 67. And then I could go on and on. We talked about a lot of his credits, like I said, in the other two films we covered. That brings me to Glenda Jackson, who plays Gudrun Brangwer. I'm probably horribly getting that name wrong, but that's okay. I'm used to mispronouncing things. She actually won an Academy Award for this film.
Yep.
And she also won another one in 73 for a film called A Touch of Class, starring along actor George Segal. And another interesting piece of trivia about her, she would go on to become a member of parliament later on in her life. So she actually gave up the acting bug at a certain point. She's been in stuff like, obviously, this. She was in another movie with Reed that came out in 72 called The Triple Echo. She was in Nasty Habits, The Boyfriend, Sunny. You were just talking about Sunday, Bloody Sunday. She was in that in 71.
Yep.
The Music Lovers. So she's done a bunch of different stuff. Oh, and she did one more final film called The Class of Miss Michael with Oliver Reed. That came out, and I forgot to write the date on that, but that came out in the 70s as well. And like I said, she was impressive. I could definitely see why she won the Oscar for this role. From what I read correctly, I think this film got nominated for 5 Oscars, but this was the only one. I think she was the only one that actually won the Oscar.
Yeah. I think Women in Love is Russell's only Oscar nomination for director.
Oh, yeah? Wow.
Yeah.
We have next female lead is her sister, Jenny Linden, who's playing Ursula Brangwyn. Did I write? Yeah, hold on one second, guys. I'm losing my place here. Yeah, Jenny Linden, Ursula Brangwyn. Her performance actually won her a BAFTA nomination as most promising newcomer for Women in Love. She was in Nightmare in 64. Been in stuff like the television show The Avengers in 64. The Saint TV show. She did a handful of those episodes. Women in Love, of course. Valentino in 77, a movie called Old Dracula in 74. Stuff like that. She didn't have quite as big as career as some of the other people. I think at a certain point, I think she stopped the whole acting thing. But she had some cool little films, and the fact that right out the gate she got a nomination for this film is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
We have playing the father, Alan Webb, who's playing Thomas Critch, and he's the father of Gerald Critch. He's been in stuff like The Silent Enemy, which came out in 58, The Scapegoat, which came out in 59, a movie called King Rat, which came out in 65, The Taming of the Shrew, and he was in the Great Train Robbery with Sean Connery in 78. So he's got a nice little resume to him. Playing Mrs. Critch would be Catherine Willman. She was also in The Devils. And believe it or not, she was playing the one crazy demented nun, the one that's like out to get him. That's, remember, that spurns him because Reed's character won't sleep with him.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So in this movie, of course, she plays. I feel like she's a little bit over the top in this movie too. She kind of plays a little bit, a little bit
Yeah.
crazy, a little bit cold, at least cold. So she was in The Devils, The Boyfriend Again. She was in a movie called Oh Lucky Man, which came out in '73. A movie called Madhouse, which came out in '74, and then another one that came out in '77, March or Die. So those are like some of the names, films that you might be familiar with her. Um, Also, Sharon Gurney, who's playing the sister Laura Critch. Um, she is not in this film for long, but it's a pivotal little part. She ends up drowning in the lake, not to give too much away, with her husband Tibby. Um, she's been in stuff like Deathline, which came out in '72. She was most notably known for a TV series called Portrait of a Lady, which was out in '68. And those are the big ones. She's also another one that didn't have like a gigantic resume, so she plays that. Next, we have Christopher Gable, who plays Tibby Lipton, who marries Laura Critch. And he's been in stuff like The Music Lovers in '71, The Boyfriend in '71, The Lair of the White Worm, which came out in '88. And he's done some other stuff, but he's mostly known for television. So he's mostly known as a television actor, but he had another, like I said, small part in the film, but a pivotal part, I think, and really messed up part.
Yeah.
And finally, I wrote down Ledak Shabal, which is another name I'm probably mispronouncing, and he's an artist. And he basically Gudrun becomes smitten by him, which of course drives Oliver Reed's character crazy.
Yeah.
And he's been in stuff like Billion Dollar Brain. He was in the original Casino Royale, which came out in '67. The Fearless Vampire Killers, and also he showed up in The Boyfriend in '71. So that's like the main cast. I think I got everybody.
Oh, you've got one person though.
Who did I forget?
So in the beginning, Gudrun and whatever her name is, Ursula, their father, Michael Goff.
How did I forget that? Okay.
Yeah, but he, I mean, I know him as basically Tim Burton's Batman's Alfred. Yeah.
He was actually
slipping.
Alfred throughout all those first 4 Batman movies, even the ones without any of the rest of the cast for the most part. They kept because he was so good as. I mean, it's who I know him as. I know I've seen him in other stuff since, but like he'll always be Alfred to me in a very complimentary way.
I mean,
No,
like Michael Caine, who Nolan picked to sort of be, Alfred. Goff has had like a very distinguished movie and TV career in Britain or whatever. So I just remember like watching this the first time and being like, "Oh, Alfred."
I'll be honest, I didn't recognize that as him in the movie. So
yeah,
I love Michael Goff.
It threw me off too until I did the credits, and I don't know how I missed that. I'm slipping, guys. It's been a while since I did my last episode. I'm off my game.
I think, in your defense, I think the reason I might not have recognized him is I think outside of Alfred, I think a lot of the other stuff I would have seen him in would have probably been later '70s, '80s types films, so he might have looked a little bit different. He's only in this briefly. And I'll also come actually to both your defenses. One, your defense, Jose, of just good knowledge. Alan Bates did die in the early 2000s. Actually, died, I think it was December 27th, 2003, if I remember Google correctly.
Okay.
But to defend John, it was IMDb screwing him over because he was in a movie called Shuttlecock, but it came out in 1993, not 2020. IMDb has it mislisted as 2020, meaning either there's another movie that came out in 2020 with the name of Shuttlecock and they just accidentally put in the 1993 information, or they just screwed up the year. So he was in a movie called Shuttlecock, but it didn't come out in 2020. It came out in 1993.
I do stumble with my words, and I do look down at my notebook. I look down at my cheat sheet a lot, but I was using the ultimate cheat sheet, which is IMDb.com. That's like, without that, I'd be lost. And I was like, did I really write that down wrong? I'm like, I'm really fucking slipping here.
Yeah, so I want to look quick because I'm like, if you said IMDb, I know IMDb has done that before where they screwed me royally. with
Yeah.
that, and that was the case of just being screwed. And I even tried to look quick that like, well, did Shuttlecock maybe not really see release till 2020? But I really quick, I didn't see anything to state that, so I think it was just an
Yeah.
IMDb mistake. But also good on Jose to know. It was like, wait a minute, didn't Alan Bates die in the early 2000s? Not out of the norm, because I know Marlon Brando has a voice role in a movie called, I think it's like Big Bug Man or something, that still hasn't seen release. So if it ever does,
Oh, yeah.
it'll technically be on his resume as something that came out like decades after he died.
Right.
But
That's crazy. That's wild. All right, so yeah, now that I think I finally got it, hopefully I didn't miss anybody. I guess I think I'll turn things over to you, Justin, if you want to talk a little
yes,
bit about the story, give a
yeah.
synopsis.
So my challenge to myself every time is like, can I do this as a one sentence synopsis, even if it's a little bit of a longer sentence? And this one, in a sense, could be easily done in a sentence, but I didn't want to simplify it too much. So I think I did this
Yeah.
well enough, because a lot of this movie is, like Jose said, deals with a lot of themes. So if you're trying to sell it quick, you don't want to oversell it. So
Yeah.
two sisters enter into dramatically different relationships that challenge all participants' views on love, life, and sexuality in a post-World War I mining town. I think that at
Oh,
least
that's really
captures
good.
the basics of the plot. I think originally, and I've seen other people just say two sisters enter into different relationships. I'm like, well, yeah, but you're kind of missing some of the themes. So I'm like, how do I do it without going too overt with it? But I think that's a
Yeah.
quick way of, like, if you were scrolling through a TV guide, that would probably be the best way to sum it up. But yeah, it's a much deeper movie than that. But I think
Well, I think
specifically putting,
this
what were
one's
you gonna say?
hard. I think this one's hard to really get into the meat of it because there's a lot of meat to this film, I feel like.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
some of that more tongue in cheek than I think we meant to be. But yes, I think there's a lot under the surface going on in this movie, and I'm very curious to hear both of your thoughts, especially Jose's, because I know you mentioned you love this film and you've seen it quite a bit. So I'm really curious to hear what you think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Jose? What do you think overall? Or is there anything in particular that stands out, or just your general thoughts on the film?
Well, so like I said, I've
Yeah.
seen this a ton, and I still have no idea really how to pin down these characters, because in a way, and I think this is by design, a lot of them say and do things that are completely contradictory to each other. Like they'll say
Yeah.
one thing and then act
Mhm.
in a completely different way. But I think what's great about that is that, that's human beings are messy, right?
Yeah.
We are, I think, by nature contradictory, because we
Mhm.
don't wear our insides on our outsides, and not in like a, Hannibal kind of way. What I mean is that, there's an internal monologue and life to everybody that doesn't always match the outside.
Yeah.
And so I think that this movie, in addition to being, very frank in its sort of
Yeah.
like sexuality and nudity,
Mhm.
um, it's trying to explore something uh, beyond just relationships. I think it's
Yeah.
trying to explore, in a way, human enlightenment, maybe through
Mhm.
love and through your connections with other people. Um, and so I think what's interesting about this film is that, yeah, it is initially about the two sisters, but I think that this is really, there's sort of a counterpoint between the three women that are actually featured in this film. So there's Ursula Gudrun, and then to some extent Laura Critch, who we see being who we see marrying in the beginning. And
Yeah.
I think it sort of examines um just their relationships and their outlooks on life in the context of, this small mining town that is changing from, family business to industrialization and machines, and how all of that is in the context of our society. I know it's very, very heavy, a lot of what they're exploring, um, but a lot of these characters are trying to sort of look for something beyond what society has imposed upon them, right?
Mhm.
So, we have Oliver Reed's character, who is sort of this working class character. He's taking over his father's business. And he's very much about appearances, right? Like his character is hated. Even his father is sort of like, I don't like what you're doing with the business, and I won't have to deal with it much longer because I'm gonna die or whatever. And then you've got Alan Reed's character, who is very much a free spirit. Like he's all philosophy talk. He's all about, why do we do these sort of things? We need to bust free from them.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of intellectualization about
Mhm.
where you are in your society and how to break free from that. And so a lot of people, I think, may look or see the dialogue in this film and be like, wow, this is super hoity-toity, it's super like highfalutin or whatever.
Mhm.
But again, it's about these characters trying to connect to something that they might not be able to articulate. They're looking for something beyond the boundaries of just normal conventional society that will enlighten them, but make them feel alive and connect them with like their feelings and their emotions. But also trying to struggle beyond, if you are a woman, this is what you do. You get married, and hopefully you
Yeah.
marry well into society, and you escape middle class into upper class. And then if you're a man, there's a certain notion about your masculinity, and you're supposed to have relationships with women. And beyond that, what else is there? And so I think that this film is tough because it's showing you characters trying to do this, and Russell does this in such a visual, metaphorical way that
Mhm.
it's not obvious really what you're seeing, right? So for as
Yeah.
an example, there's a scene where um Alan Bates's character is sort of going around his philosophical ways, and his wife sort of like, or his girlfriend at the time, sort of like hits him in the head. And then he has this weird epiphany where he strips off all his clothes, and he's, in the forest, and he's rubbing up against trees. And there's even a progenitor for that gladiator shot that Ridley Scott steals, of him like moving his hand over like the grain and sort of like connecting with nature. At least I'm going to say that's where the progenitor of that scene comes from, which has been duplicated a
Mhm.
million times in other films. But it's sort of like, okay, what is happening here? It's a drunk
Yeah.
man who's been hit in the head, and he strips off all his clothes, and he's
He's running through the woods.
rolling
Yeah.
around in
Yeah.
like the dirt. Like, what is he doing? And it's this need to sort of connect with nature, and to uh be connected to something greater than just us, and the little steps that we take to sort of like change society. And so that's what you're up against when you see this film. So I think that like there's all of these different layers. Like, yes, you can look at these relationships, and you can look at these kooky characters who are like, I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be an artist, and I'm going to feel something more than just what life expects of me. But I think that the more you watch this, the more that you look in deeper into these sort of things. And I think we're all trying to do that. We're all trying to figure out our own relationships, and sort of find our own sexual identities, and our personal relationships, and what that really means. And something that this film does that's very brave, and the source material does this as well, is that
Mhm.
it posits that yes, we will have our normal coupled relationships with whomever we're going to fall in love with, but there could be other relationships, maybe with the same sex, that could be as fruitful and as fulfilling as
Mhm.
the traditional marriage. And I think
Mhm.
what's really brave about this film is that it doesn't shy away from the fact that Ellen Bates's character is clearly in love with Oliver Reed's character, and he's trying to not necessarily encourage him, but he is trying to basically say, look, dude, I'm in love with you, and we can have this great relationship, and we can
Mhm.
still be married with our spouses, but
Mhm.
that's not something to shy away from. And it's almost sad that Oliver Reed's character is kind of like, well, that's okay. Maybe when I understand it more, we'll have this. And there's a very pivotal scene where they're talking about Bates is talking about his love for Oliver Reed, and the way that they shoot it is, it's almost like they're in front of mirrors, and so there's double images and somebody stuck in the middle, and this sort of quandary, like, okay, society doesn't like same-sex, relationships, and how far is this love between man and man going to go? How, am I going to be able to accept this? And ultimately Reed's character cannot, and when he's sort of shunned by the one woman, he feels like there's nothing left for him, so it's, unfortunately, it's a very dark look at like love, but I also think it's very hopeful in the respect that a lot of these characters open their own horizons. Some
Yeah.
of them unfortunately don't, to their detriment. But I think it's also a very sort of brave film about just trying to explore your own identity and find things and connect to things out there that society might not normally tell you to, a lot of it is very confounding though, because it's almost like the matchup of the couples is sort of like mismatched. Like Glenda Jackson's character is very much an artist, and she wants to see people connecting with like their primal instinct and emotions. And you would think that she would hook up with the Alan Bates character, who's more artistic, more philosophical in some ways, but it's a mismatch because Bates and his philosophy character ends up connecting with the more working class girl, whereas the artistic Glenda Jackson ends up with the more working class Oliver Reed. So I don't know. There's so much that I could like go into, I think, about things. I mean, just right off the bat, unfortunately, it's very weird. We're at a wedding, and there's the tradition that like the groom is not supposed to see the bride
Yeah.
before they're right in front of the altar, and they see each other and they kiss, and then there's that odd imagery which I had never picked up on until I watched it for this show, but they're running to get married after they've seen each other, which is a bad luck sign. But as they're running through a cemetery, right? And then they're kissing in front of the church, in front of like the children who are like the flower bearers or whatever for the ceremony. And it's sort of like, oh, they're doing something in front of like innocent people, and then they're the couple that ends up dying. And so it's, there's all these themes about the spontaneity of like youth and the spontaneity and how wonderful and fulfilling that can be, but that can also be deadly because that couple is the one who they follow their sort of like feelings without any regard to consequences, and she ends up drowning in the lake, and so does he or whatever. And there's also these weird ties that they're doing where we see the couple die and the embrace that they're in when they find the body, and then the camera sort of dissolves to Ursula and Alan Bates after having made love, but they're in the same embrace. And so it's kind of like, wait a minute, does that mean that their relationship is doomed? Or is Russell and Kramer trying to say that like love, sex, and death, it all kind of has a weird finality to it? And so this is just me ranting and raving because this is one of my favorite films. And like I said, I have seen it a million times and I see something new and it speaks to me differently each time. But yeah, I don't know how else to describe this movie except to say that it's challenging. It's challenging in what it shows you. And it's also kind of an undercover musical because there is these weird segments where people are dancing and there is choreography and stuff. And so I don't know, I kind of love that. That art and love and dance, it's all mixed together in music. Yeah.
Well,
I
I don't know how anyone's going to follow that up, Jose.
I don't
That was
know.
amazing.
I just feel like I've been
Seriously.
ranting, but
No, you're not
yeah.
ranting at all, dude. I've been fumbling my whole way through this episode, making mistakes and stuff, but that was amazing. I mean, I watched it, but like I said, I watched it 3 times. The last time the commentary started the first viewing last week, and then midway through the week I watched the second viewing, and then this morning I watched the commentary. And it's such a beautiful film. From a technical perspective, it's such a beautiful film. The story, the acting, of course, is superb. Everything checks all the boxes, and yet I still found myself trying to, like you said initially when you first talked about the episode of why you picked this one, you mentioned trying to grasp it all because there's just so much going on. And it's not like you can't grasp the story. The story isn't that out of reach to grasp, but there's just so much meat to it and so much things that have meaning in this film. I was trying to like figure out my opinion and try to put that together in a cohesive sentence. um, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm still struggling. It's amazing though. I mean, the
Hey, me
film is
too.
amazing. It really is. The film's amazing. The story's amazing. Like the story, obviously is paying a nod to the original writer, T.H. Lawrence. Obviously, I hear there are some differences from the book, but obviously that's always going to be the case. But from what I understand, I hear all the differences are fantastic. There's just so much meat on this film, and just has so much to say. And I think it says something about friendship. It says something about love, like you said. It says something about being in love with someone, but also maybe wanting to be in love with someone else as well. Like there's just so much going on. I don't really. I'm trying to do a job here, a good job of critiquing and telling people how I feel about it. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm struggling. It's just a really good film. I think everything works. I think it's a film that challenges you. I think it's a film that asks to watch it again because I feel like the more you watch it, the more you'll take away from it. And I guess that's all I can really like say like when it comes to how I feel about the film. So I will defer to you, Justin, and get your
Okay,
thoughts.
all right. It is going to be hard to follow Jose, but I'm glad that you were here. And I'm also glad, John, that you had said that you watched this a few times because I only watched this one time yesterday. And I'm
Yeah,
very conflicted on this movie because I agree with you, John. Also is like this is a fantastically made movie. Performances are great. The
yeah,
costuming is very good. Doing the period piece, getting this like I
sure.
think it's set around 1920, I want to say. The small town look and how everything is changing. Some like you said, the shots. I mean, I didn't even pick up on the being next to the cemetery. Even though I immediately did think, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not big on the bad luck, but even I know the groom is not supposed to not just see his bride, but also run and basically kiss her through the veil, to which Oliver
Yeah,
Reed does with a great harumph. What a spectacle!
What a
Like I just
spectacle.
I loved that. But where I think I'm conflicted on this film, and I think it does show this is something that's going to reward a couple of rewatches, is since it is much deeper than it seems on the surface. And at first, it does seem like it is almost not just like commentary on sexuality, especially. I mean, we get to that scene where it's basically Japanese wrestling, but it's Bates and Reed wrestling each other naked, which
yeah,
it's hard to hit that at the hour mark and then follow up with that. But it is a fantastic scene. It's very obviously like in one aspect, yeah, it's on the nose of them wrestling with their sexuality, but at the same time, the way that the dialogue and how they react to it is not as simple as there's not like this simple shock and awe of what did I just do? It's of why did I do this? Why do I, feel comfortable with this, but also don't. So
mhm,
I do think it's deep. I think where my struggles are coming from, maybe, is since while there is definitely different classes here, not just with obviously Oliver Reed running the mining shaft, so we see that class, but also, one of the women being one of the sisters coming from working class, is since a lot of it is more focused on some of the more upper class and seeing Reed's family. Maybe it's just since I almost like the approach there because we do see more of the class struggle coming from the one struggling than seeing trying to actually dig deeper into the humanity behind, what can just be the rich and possibly bored. I mean, there's aspects like early on when you're seeing their conversations that kind of make you think of The Great Gatsby, where it's like, are they just talking to speak because they're bored now and not really thinking deeply? But then as the film goes on, they're being challenged about actual, life, and there's great scenes with Bates. I think for me, it's also a matter of just that first hour, since it's more building up and has more of the outlandish scenes, if you will, than the second half, which is much more dramatically based. I wouldn't say dense, but it is more grounded in that regards of everything kind of falling apart and everyone wrestling more with everything. I think it just started to lose me, so I kind of felt almost a little bit distant and cold. But it is something when it came away from watching this, I'm like, this seems like a movie that almost makes you need to feel that the first time you see it because you're challenging all the other characters' perspectives. And now that even you, John, saying you watched this 3 times in the past week, kind of makes me go, I think if I revisit this again, the actual dramatic heft and the narrative will stick better with me more than
Yeah.
just the technical aspect did. Because as it stands now, it's a film that I think, technically speaking, is fantastic, but on an emotional level, kind of kept me at arm's length, and I didn't quite engage with the sisters or as much as I enjoyed the performances. But the more I'm hearing not just your thoughts, but the more I'm wrestling with my own thoughts, I feel like that's the point. And it's not like a Maxine where, yeah, we got the point, but they were too heavy handed with it. Here, it almost feels like you're going to be too heavy handed at points, because you even have Reed saying to his father, oh, you, I think I actually even have the line written down here. Let me see if I had it in my notes, where it was basically, oh yes. Where was it? You made a fortune exploiting them and are now trying to ease your conscience by throwing them a few coins. So there are moments in here where the dialogue is very almost on the nose, but then you realize, well, that's because Reed is wrestling with himself. So it's easier for them to just force themselves to talk about this, what's on the surface level, than digging in deeper. And then when you get to the scenes, like, you think the fallout from that Japanese wrestling fight would be that on the nose, but the dialogue isn't. It's much more inner turmoil. So I think I appreciate this film more on this first watch than I think I would say I liked it. But especially hearing how much, I mean, your wonderful review of it, Jose, and even John, you saying that you're kind of struggling the same way I am, where you're like, you can see why it's good, but there's a part of like, why am I not seeing it as much? And I think it's just a matter of, this is a film that needs to ruminate a lot longer than just a day. But the fact that I'm still thinking about it, not even just because of the show, but thinking about it deeply even a day later, I can see myself months down the road, and I do want to pick this up, the Criterion Blue, also just because I do want to hear the commentary tracks, just to also see the other perspectives. But it is a deeper film. There's a lot more going on. So it's not as simple. I mean, the fact that I didn't want to just give it a simple synopsis of like, two sisters fall in love with two dudes,
Yeah.
or something
Yeah.
like that already told me that obviously I appreciate this movie more, that I don't want to shortchange it, because it is a
Yeah.
lot more going on. And yeah, I mean, and sometimes some of the elements, like obviously Bates running through, my first thought was like, dude, some of these bushes and trees you're going by are very prickly. You should be careful. It's like sometimes, and there are times, like there's a great spot where there's an argument and there's a gentleman that just rides by on a bike, and there's just that brief moment where they have to be kind to each other because, hi, how's it going? As there's this really deep emotional, I got a chuckle out of me, but I think it also really talked about how we feel in society, where even in our ugliest moments, we still feel the need to kind of keep up appearances when somebody else comes by, instead of just ignoring that biker or whatever. And really, if you're the biker, just like, maybe it's just me being me, I would just be like, well, I see something's going on there, so I'm not gonna be like polite. I'm just gonna try to stay in the sidelines. But here, it's still that proper area and how things are changing. So I think there's a lot going on here that I would be interested to revisit it, and I would recommend people see it. I do think it is one of Reed's finer performances, because as much as there are moments where he does get to be Reed, I think there's a lot more introspection for him here, where there's not as much, in a good way, Reed being what we expect to be of Reed, where he's shouting. It's more reserved, in those moments where he does that feel more earned. But as it stands, it's a film I appreciate more than I like, at least on this first viewing.
Yeah. No, for sure. No, I get where
I
you're
can,
coming from.
Justin, I can understand that too, because I remember watching this the first time, and I think all of the sort of intellectualization, and when I say that, a lot of like them talking about their feelings, but it's not even talking about their feelings like on the level of like 50 Shades of Grey, the way that novel's written. It's like talking about love like in a Tolstoy kind of way, like very
Yes,
arty,
perfect.
very
Tolstoy's
lyrical.
perfect.
And it feels a little cold. Like, the first time you watch it, you kind of can't connect to it. But I think that they work a lot. And the other confounding thing, I think, is that, again, that these characters will say and do one thing and then completely contradict themselves minutes later, right?
Yeah.
And in particular, when I think about, the sort of snobby girlfriend that Rupert has in the beginning, about how she's like all, artsy fartsy, and let's look at the, oh, they're little flames. Now I see the little flames, and look at life this way. And then she's the one who ends up hitting him over the head and being the most violent, right? And so again, there's all of these contradictions, and and about faces that a lot of these characters make that on a first viewing can kind of be like, wait, what did I just watch? Especially when they get to Switzerland and there's all that weird shenanigans going on,
Mhm.
and the sort of like seemingly gay, creepy German predator, like what's going on there,
And I definitely think on a first watch, that kind of everything in Switzerland kind of came out of nowhere, seemingly. And I think that's the
Yeah.
point. But I think it wasn't as, again, I don't want to say cold again because it's Switzerland, but it wasn't as engaging or as beguiling, I think is the best word, as maybe that first hour was for
Yeah,
me.
absolutely.
But especially now knowing where things are going to go, and maybe even just knowing a little bit of the themes that they want to go for, I think revisits will be more kind to me into this film than this first time watching. And it's a harder one for me too, because anytime you handle types of like almost aristocrats and like this kind of time period, that can be something that's a hurdle in and of itself for me. Something like Saltburn does it tremendously well because one, it's taking the piss out of it a lot of times, but two, it's also encased more in this almost like thriller murder mystery, and it's, they're playing out more of the theatrics, I think. Whereas this, it's not going to play theatrics. It's playing up, it's in a sense, like you said, Tolstoy, even something like A Great Gatsby, where that approach is, it's not always about the theatrics, about the humdrum nature of it that can take a little bit to kind
Yeah.
of reach and really, and obviously Great Gatsby, I mean, you get to that in high school, and at first when you're in high school, you're not ready for it. But as time goes on, you begin to appreciate that more. And I think that's going to be very similar to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I yeah, it's just, I just feel like it can be tough on that first watch because there are some scenes where you will think to yourself, why am I watching this? Like I still struggle over, there's a scene where Oliver Reed is riding a horse and he's
Mhm.
chasing the train. And then eventually
Yes.
there comes the point where, he can take the diversion, but the train is going by. And yet at the same time, he's still whipping the horse. He's still cutting the horse with his spurs or whatever. And clearly Ursula is just like put out by this. She's like nearly crying, but there's something exciting about it to Gudrun, to the point where the train leaves, the horse goes away, and then she yells at him, "I think you should be very proud." And it's sort of like, wait a minute, what is it that she's excited about him being cruel to this horse and him
Mhm.
being this like macho figure? And the rest of the film sort of develops that, but that scene is sort of like, there's a couple scenes like that. Like, why am I watching this? Like, what
Yeah.
is it in the greater context of the work? And I like that about this film, is that it's challenging.
Yeah, because in that scene too, at first I was just like, well, is this like just supposed to say like somebody like a Reed who's so used to life catering to him, being his status, isn't liking this idea that he can't basically overcome this train, even with somebody crying, just because she's overwhelmed, like be quiet or quiet down. Like, well, a train can't do that. But then, like you said, when it's the other sister kind of reacting differently, is it because it is macho, where it's like, oh, I see you as controlling this chaos instead of running away from it. You're gonna like, stand your ground basically, and basically fend off this train. It doesn't matter if the horse wants to run away. But it's like, what is it trying to say? And there is an interesting element of, what is, but it is a scene that lingers. It seems almost too long. And again, I think that's the point of like, are we lingering too much on our own, resting on our laurels? So I don't know exactly what that scene is supposed to represent, but it can mean a couple of things. And the fact that I did think of a few, even if my initial was just like, yeah, the rich just think everyone's gonna, you
Yeah.
know, sidestep them, when it's like, this is a train, this is man-made, but it's still, but you're also disrupting nature now too by not letting nature take its course and let the horse run away. You're forcing it to bend to your will in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
No, that's good. That's a good point. And I think also it demonstrates um Gerald's sort of like cruelty, right? He
Mhm.
treats the Oliver Reed character, he treats his workers really terribly, he treats the horses really terribly, and whoever he's going to end up with, she's going to get treated really terribly too. But then also just Gudrun sort of, I think she just gets excited by people acting out of instinct and being violent, and sort of that excites her. And I think that scene sort of shows that she probably will not connect with somebody more working class who works with his hands.
I mean,
Mhm.
I
Like
think
she,
I think with my interpretation of her character, and this is, I'm not trying to discount and make it too paper thin. I feel like she's equally as fucked up, pardon my French. And I think she gets off, like when you get to the Alps and she's flirting with that guy, and she knows that guy's it's not going to happen. I think she kind of knows that she's what she's doing to Robert Reed or Oliver Reed's character. I feel like she knows that she's pushing his buttons, and while she might appreciate the conversation of the artist, I think she's kind of getting off on pushing Oliver Reed's buttons and getting him kind of like worked up. And I feel like you were saying the things about Oliver Reed's characters. I think in a weird way, it's like these two characters. Not I don't want to say they're evil characters, but like these people that are like they have like we all do, I'm sure to some degree, they have this dark side, and you could see like these two dark people, and it's like maybe you can't have two dark people together because that's not going to happen. You have to have one that has a little bit warmer. It's not going to be a good pairing if you have two people that are like, and then ultimately, I don't think we didn't even get to the part where Oliver Reed runs out into the wilds and kills himself. You know what I mean? Like, not spoilers, guys.
Yeah.
The movie came out in '69, so I don't think we're spoiling too much.
Right.
Like he's driven to suicide, and of course it's a very heavy scene and it has a lot of meaning to it. But it's like, wow, you know what I mean? Like ultimately we culminate with that, followed by Alan Bates and his girlfriend and his girlfriend asking, "Aren't I enough?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "I can love you, but I can also have love for my friend." Like, and she's just kind of looking at him like, "Well, I should be enough." You know what I mean? Like, it really.
Well, I hate to bring up the P word, but Paul Schrader, God's Lonely Man. I mean if Oliver Reed's character just kind of and Gudrun's character talks about, or no, I'm sorry, Ursula's character talks about this as well. Like we're all alone, we're all lonely, right? And so he chooses to be like, well, I'm truly alone. I'll just die alone, and he walks out into the snow and just sort of, and then they brought him back and left him in that bed, and he's all like,
that was
froze. I was like,
that was kind of disturbing, actually, especially considering like as like we said, as outlandish as certain scenes can be, like that was grounded in its like creepiness almost.
Yeah. I was like, is he thawing or is he really dead?
I mean, I guess it's really taking a while for the ambulance to get there. Because they're just sitting in the fire. She's sawing, and she's asking if he loves him. Meanwhile, the friends in the back room just chilling, waiting for the.
It's almost like a disturbed way of them not wanting to accept that he killed himself or he's dead. And he's like, if we just put him here, he's like you said, he's going to fall out, or he's just almost like it's not a reality.
But like I said, any film that I can watch 3 times in 1 week and still feel like I want to go back and put another couple more watches into it, because I feel like I still I don't consider myself a stupid person. Other people might think otherwise, but and I still feel like there are elements that I'm missing and meaning that I'm missing in the film. So if a film can do that to you and want you to go back and try to discover more, I feel like the film's good. Any film that can do that, you're doing something right. You know what I mean? So I would definitely ultimately highly recommend this. I'm just annoyed that this is another one that, unless you go to Russian YouTube, apparently, that's what you Russian. You can't find it anywhere else other than going out and obviously buying physical media, But
which I will be getting this soon.
Yeah, no,
I want to dig into this more.
It's definitely worth it. There's some cool extra features. There's 2 commentaries. There's one by the writer. There's one by Ken Russell. There's a bunch of interviews with different people that worked on it. So it's definitely highly worth it. Well, that's awesome. I guess that wraps up today's episode. Unless you guys, anyone else have any closing thoughts they want to say, or final things that they feel like they need to.
Oh,
okay.
Kitty.
No, he's Cheetah wants to say that I Am Dumb, and he is smart. He thinks it's one of the most intellectual films he's ever seen, and he's like, Dad just needs to watch it a couple more times to get on my level.
Bring me more of the art films. No, well, I want to, of course, thank you guys again for both coming on.
Well, actually, I was going to add. I was just going to add one more thing.
Yes, of course.
Curiously enough, This is the first film production for a studio called Brandywine Productions, a production company called Brandywine Productions. If that sounds familiar to anybody, it's because it was founded by Walter Hill, David Giller, and Gordon Carroll. And after this film and a film called The Student Body, they primarily produced all of the Alien movies. So
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, Alien versus Predator, Alien versus Predator Requiem, Prometheus, Covenant, and then the upcoming Romulus. So Brandywine Productions, this was their first, and then they
Wow.
decided we're going to do Aliens.
Well, you know what? Look, I'm actually looking forward to Romulus. It looks really good. But let's say if we do another Alien movie, let's go in a different direction. Let's do Aliens in Love. All right, let's just
Oh yeah,
make women in love, but with the aliens and the xenomorphs and
absolutely.
Yeah.
Can a xenomorph and a human make love and save the world?
Maybe that's what they were going for
also
in Alien
Space
Resurrection.
Force, right? Whenever the scene where the guy's in the diner is he's eating his food, and all of a sudden the thing just bursts out of his chest.
And then he's
You know,
like,
that's what
and then the face hugger or the alien's like, I know I just burst out of your chest, but I can love you too.
All right. So we have not decided for next month. That will be in the decision of Justin, which he will touch base with us at some point. And he will
I
let us
mean,
know.
I can reveal now if you want. I did
no?
decide.
Okay, yeah. Well, I didn't know.
Uh,
Didn't know you figured.
So I had a couple of choices in mind, but I kept coming to one. So John and I had a conversation off air after the last episode because I brought up Hamilton book, and then he had said how he had gone on Hamilton and got Hannibal Brooks, and I felt bad because I'm like, oh, look at me, convincing you to spend more money. Well, then a couple of weeks later, I went back on Hamilton, and on top of getting a few other things, I'm like, well, I'm gonna get Hannibal Brooks because it's only like $6. So we're gonna go with Hannibal Brooks, another Oliver Reed movie. And
Oh,
I did
right.
check if you want to play it wrong. It is on Amazon Prime, so I think it's
Yeah.
still on Hamilton. If you want to just get the Kino Lorber Blue for like $6, but I decided, you know what, I can't stop thinking about Hannibal Brooks ever since you brought it up, and I've been kind of curious. So what a way to finally do it.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome. Very cool. I look forward to that. That's going to be
Actually,
exciting.
I think
Lots of
Kino had
fun.
a sale recently, didn't they? So maybe.
Yeah,
I think so too. So and
Yeah.
and again, I don't know if it still is there, but I know a lot of times Kino overstock goes to Hamilton book, and you can usually get their blues. They usually have them. Like that one was only what, $5.95. They usually do the Kinos pretty cheap.
Yeah, I was surprised
Which is-
because I went on Amazon right after I bought it just for shits and giggles, and they wanted like $27 for the same fucking movie. Like literally
Yeah,
20.
and
Which
I'll
is
tell
All
you
right,
what, I
logging
think
into Hamilton book right now.
Yeah, I think my River of Death blue that I got from Hamilton for like $6 is a Kino, and I think we were talking when I was on GGTMC. I think that goes like because it's out of print, goes for like 70 now. So I'm always
Wow.
sometimes just like anytime I'm like, yeah, if it's only $5, I might as well just throw it onto the cart. And I can't remember what I was getting off of Hamilton, why I went back because I get emails from them and they're like, this is new, and I'm like, oh, I want that. And then I'm just like, well, hold up. He said Hannibal Brooks. Is that still on here? So.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
I actually did a viewing of that. Well, I won't go into my thoughts because I want to wait until next month. But so yeah, no, definitely that'll be exciting. That'll be a fun one to watch, and I already own it, so I don't have to spend more money, which is a good thing.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
So I guess with that, I'll give a shout out to all the podcasts everyone should be listening to. Of course, we got Jose with Watch Skip Plus, and he already gave you a little bit of a tease of what they're covering this upcoming week, Maxine. And didn't you guys just released an episode, right? You talked about
Kinds
trying
of
to remember.
Kindness. Speaking of
Kind of.
challenging movies, Yorgos Lanthimos' Kinds of Kindness. We did that episode. What a great film. Probably one of my favorites this year. You want to talk about challenging films that sit with you and you have to think about? That's definitely it. That's definitely it.
Awesome. So definitely go check that out, guys, now, and make sure you rate their podcast and be sure to like them on their Facebook page, and they're even on Discord. So check out their Discord. So definitely check out Watch Skip Plus. Of course, we have Troy and Brad over at Not a Bomb, and I know they're doing a Sword and Sandals episode, which they just dropped today, and I did not get a chance to listen to it. And I forget the name of it, so I'm sorry, Troy and Brad. But I know it off the top of my head. I just can't remember it. So that was just dropped today. And then of course we have The Godfathers to the Gentleman's Guide to Midnight Cinema. Sam and Will, every week they drop us some wonderful magic films, and they talk about such a wide variety. Week they'll be talking about something a little bit more mainstream. The next thing you know, they'll be talking about some movie that came out in the 60s or the 70s that I've never heard of before. And you know what? They've opened my eyes to a lot of wonderful films. So definitely check out their show. We have Raiders of the Podcast. Now, Raiders, these guys just blow me away because they cover like 2 films at least every week. Sometimes they've
No
done
matter
more.
you.
Like a week or so ago, they did like 4 films, and then they kind of duke it out verbally, kind of vote for which one they thought was the best. So check out those guys as well. So yeah, that's what we have as far as stuff you guys should be listening to. I'm going to try to get more reliable with my schedule, guys, because like I said, I've been doing it for the most part as a one-man show, primarily lately. And it's been hard with my work schedule and everything else to try to put everything together and get things out on a regular schedule. The next film I'm looking to do is The Legend of 1900, which is directed by Giuseppe Tornatore. And it stars Tim Roth and Vince Pruitt Taylor. It's a fantastic film. Unfortunately, I have no idea why, but it's hard to find streaming anywhere. But it is worth seeking out. I think on Amazon you can find a Blu-ray pretty inexpensive, and it's a great film. Most people know Giuseppe Tornatore from Cinema Paradiso. That's probably the most known film, the one that has the most acclaim. But I look forward to talking about that, and I'm hoping to have that out by the end of next week. So that's some stuff you guys have to look forward to. Again, thank you, Jose. Thank you, Justin, for joining me on this journey. This is just fantastic. I think it's a lot of fun going through the biography of different actors, and I look forward to talking more with you guys. So
Yeah.
I hope everybody has a great week, and I look forward to seeing everybody soon. Just give me 1 second.